Steve, there's a story out there. I guess you guys are you guys are making good money, really good money, very popular tag team. That in the Memphis area, Koko B Ware was taking your guys' entrance, and you took offense to that. Could you share your side of that story?
Sure, sure. There's been several different spins off of this, and I even had to call Stan not that long ago, as a matter of fact, because I'd heard Ricky Morton do a podcast, and what he told in the podcast didn't sound anything like what I had remembered. And then I guess, so I said, well, maybe my memory's different than him. Maybe my experience was different than his. But here was the thing. I was taught in my industry by my mentors who were Jack Briscoe, Harley Race, Terry Funk, Dory Funk Jr., and Hiro Matsuda, that if you had anything that you're protecting, example, your finish, and I use a sleeper hold in the state of Florida, so if anybody used a sleeper hold, they needed to not use a sleeper hold in the matches before me. Your character or anything like that, which weren't really that established back when I first started, but when we developed the Fabulous One, well, Koko came out and he did a character called Stagger Lee. And we just broke out with the Fabulous Ones. And now here we are with top hats and bow ties and the sequin tuxedo. And here comes Koko out and does the Stagger Lee, and he's doing the same thing. He has a white tuxedo coat on, a bow tie, and a top hat. Well, I was not only insulted, I felt like that it was like stepping right on what we're trying to do, and what that does is it dilutes what we're doing. Well, we had to travel from Memphis to Nashville, and we were in Nashville. And when I walked in the dressing room, it was a small dressing room in there, and there's a little stall shower in the corner and a toilet. And, I was pretty worked up by the time we got there, and I backed into that stall shower, and I started confronting Koko. And I started asking him questions. Now, the conversation, I can't verbatim tell you. That's 40 years ago. But I can tell you that I was heated, and I was letting him know I wasn't happy with him trying to do the same thing we're doing with our new characters, and it was infringement on what we were doing. Anyway, I sucker punched him. And I did, and I admit it, and that's just me. I mean, if I'm going to win a fight or if I'm going to be in a fight, people aren't going to ask me who started the fight and all that. They're just going to ask you who wins or loses. Well, this is what, in my knowledge, that I remember about the fight was that I sucker punched him, and then we locked up and we fought, but we didn't go down. Neither one of us went down on the floor. We hooked up and we kind of got tied up, but everybody was trying to break it up almost right away. And anyway, now Koko's really screaming and yelling at me, and saying, I'm not afraid of you, and calling me names and all of that. And I just looked at him and I said, okay, well, let's just finish it. We squared off. We went at it again. But here was the end results. And this is the best I can remember. And this is what I always weigh it on. When it was over, neither one of us had a mark on us. Neither one of us had really gone down and gotten hurt. Neither one of us had kind of quit or said, that's enough, I've had enough. Nobody had pulled one of us off of the other one. I never looked at it like I did anything to damage Koko. I didn't beat up Koko, but I never felt like Koko beat me up either. So it was kind of like, the difference is the fight that Orndorff had with Vader there. I mean, Orndorff beat Vader relentlessly, and he looked like Elephant Man when it was over. To me, that was a fight. But that's the kind of growing up I had. I mean, Koko was not my first fight, but it wasn't one that I'm proud of or one that I won. I never kicked Koko's butt. Here's the deal. Koko's a born-again Christian like I am. And when he got the Hall of Fame award with WWE, I was an agent there. Koko out of nowhere walked up to me, and we had worked 100 times. Even when I was Skinner, I worked with Koko there. Never even mentioned that fight. And Koko walked up to me and said to me, he said, I'm sorry. He said, I'm sorry for what happened in Nashville. He said, you're right. And it took a long time for me to realize that. But when I got the bird gimmick and somebody tried to imitate it, I realized how you felt that night when I did the Stagger Lee thing. So he says, I apologize, and I hope you can forgive me. And I looked at him and said, man, I forgot all about it. I love you, Koko. There's no hard feelings between you and me. I mean, he's a real man. But the people that tell the story, and sometimes, Dutch Mantel is embellished. And he said we weren't even booked in Nashville. He said we were booked in Jonesboro, and we skipped the Jonesboro show to go to Nashville. First of all, you didn't do things like that, or you got fired. You don't skip a show you're in the main event and go to another show to have a confrontation with somebody in the dressing room. But the other, I guess it's like opinions. It's like what they saw or what they felt happened. And, it's like I told Ricky Morton when I saw him after I heard his podcast, I called him out in Charlotte, North Carolina. I said, Ricky, I got to talk to you. And when I wanted to talk to him, he said his son followed me and him into a room like he knew that I was going to confront his dad about that. And his son kind of hovered over. And I looked at Ricky. I said, I don't know why you told the thing you told on that podcast, but I just don't agree with what you told. And he says, well, and he put his hands up on my shoulders and everything. Well, I love you. And he says, well, a tough guy, you're a tough guy. And you want to sucker punch nobody. Tough guys, sucker punch guys. And he says, but this is the way I saw it. And, it's just what I remember. And I said, okay. That's all I can say, but I just wanted to let you know I was really let down by that story because I didn't feel like you told it right, and you made it sound like I got beat up really bad. And for somebody that got beat up really bad and didn't have a mark on them, that was kind of hard for me to swallow when I heard it.
Good
That's
for
my
you.
story.
Good for you, Steve. I love it.
It's just what I remember. I mean, Stan was right there. I mean, if I got beat up, Stan's been in a lot of fights. As a matter of fact, I saw him beat up a guy really bad in Memphis one night, but the guy looked beat up. And I almost wanted to say, like when Ricky Morton said, I want to say, have you ever been in a fight? I mean, who's ever looked at a picture of the Rock and Roll Express and said, oh, these look like a couple of tough guys?
Yeah. Stan, do you concur with Steve's side of the story?
Yeah, I mean, as he said, of course, if you go to court and you've got 12 witnesses, you're going to get 12 different stories. That's just the way it is. The YouTube video that I watched of Morton, it was funny. I mean, he embellished it and said that Koko was in the shower showering, and Steve attacked him in the shower. Now that makes for a really good visual, I guess, if you want to laugh. Like we got Koko stark naked, lathered up in a shower, and here comes Kern charging the shower and starts fighting. Well, that didn't happen. I mean, it's just like Steve said, and Steve called it a sucker punch. To me, a sucker punch is when you throw a punch at somebody and they don't see it coming. Now this shower in Nashville is like a prefab building, and the shower is like a little RV shower. There's barely room for two grown men to even stand up in there. They were facing each other face to face. Steve threw the first punch. Now, but to me, that's not a sucker punch. If you're going to fight somebody, somebody's got to throw the first punch. Steve threw the first punch. At that time, Steve was known as the toughest guy there in that territory. Koko was afraid of Steve. And when the fight started and they spilled out of that little shower, because you can't throw anything in there, and they spilled out into the dressing room, Koko was saying, I don't want to fight you, Steve Keirns. I don't want to fight you, because he was scared. But then after they had locked horns a couple of times, and Koko realized that he was holding his own because he's a tough guy. Then he went to, I'll fight you all night, Steve Keirns. So that confidence built up in him. And but like Steve said, there was no blood, there were no marks, and I'm happy for that, because I like both of them. Of course, I don't want to see anybody get hurt. And if the truth be known, now that this is pure speculation on my part, I think Koko was told to do that. Now I could be wrong, but I think maybe somebody who was perhaps booking at that time maybe pulled him aside, said, hey, the Fabs are getting over doing that stuff. You ought to do it too, man. Try it out. And he go, okay, yeah, I'll do it. Do whatever the booker says. Now that's just like I said, that's a theory. But as it turned out, Coco's been, from what I see on YouTube, he's been in several fights and never lost any of them. So he's got to be a very tough guy. And Steve, of course, is a very tough guy. So it was just a bad deal, and I'm sorry it happened, but I'm just glad that nobody got hurt.
Well, also the best part of it is that Coco used Steve's full name when he was challenging him. Didn't call him
Yeah,
Kern or Steve. He called him Steve Kern, which is good.
yeah, that's right.